Tall Man in the Pines, a horror story. My name is Derek Callahan. I'm 31 years old, and I used to work as a wildlife photographer. I say used to, because I don't go into forests anymore. I don't go anywhere that has trees taller than I am. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. And I stopped caring about how things sound approximately 8 months ago, when I came back from the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, without my camera, without my gear, and without my colleague Marcus Webb, who has not been found. I'm recording this because the police report didn't contain everything. Couldn't contain everything. Not because I lied, but because there are things I saw that don't fit into the language of a police report. A police report has boxes to fill in. What happened to me in the Allegheny doesn't fit in boxes. So, I'm recording this, and if you're listening, I need you to understand one thing before I start. I'm not a person who frightens easily. I have photographed grizzly bears in Montana from 40 feet away. I have spent nights alone in the Boundary Waters in November. I have done things that require a specific relationship with fear. A relationship where you acknowledge the fear, file it away, and keep working. I was good at that relationship. I built my career on it. I am not good at it anymore. It started as a commission. A conservation organization hired Marcus and me to document old-growth forest sections in the Allegheny. The areas that hadn't been logged, the parts of the forest that were still original, untouched, the trees several hundred years old, and the undergrowth dense and dark beneath them. Beautiful work. The kind of assignment you feel lucky to get. We drove up in mid-October. The Allegheny in October is extraordinary. The hardwoods going red and gold, the light coming through the canopy at low angles. Everything saturated with color before the gray of winter takes over. We'd been there before, both of us, and we were looking forward to it. We talked in the car about the shots we wanted to get, argued companionably about equipment, ate gas station sandwiches, and drank bad coffee. Normal. Easy. We set up base camp at a designated backcountry site, about 4 miles in from the nearest trailhead. 2 tents, a shared cooking area, our equipment laid out and organized. Professional. We'd done it 100 times. The first 2 days were perfect. The light was everything we'd hoped for. The old growth sections were extraordinary. Trees 3 and 4 feet in diameter. The canopy so high above us it felt like the ceiling of a cathedral. The ground beneath them carpeted in moss and fern. I shot maybe 800 frames in 2 days. Marcus was working on the macro side, lichen, fungal growth, the detail work that required patience and stillness. We barely crossed paths during the day. Met back at camp in the evening. Ate, talked, and slept well. The third day was when I first noticed it. I was maybe 2 miles from camp, working the edge of a clearing where the old growth gave way to younger secondary forest. Good light in that transition zone. Interesting texture contrast. I was moving slowly, the way you do when you're looking for shots. head down, stopping often, watching the light change. And I had the persistent, low-grade feeling that I was being observed. Now, that feeling is not unusual in forests. Any photographer who spends significant time in wilderness knows it. The forest watches you. Animals watch you from cover. Birds track your movement. Everything alive in a healthy forest is paying attention to the thing that doesn't belong. It's a normal sensation. I noted it and moved on. But this was different from the animal watching feeling. The animal watching feeling comes from multiple directions, shifting, distributed, the sense of many small attentions. This was singular. One point, one source, located, as best I could tell, somewhere in the tree line, at the far edge of the clearing, where the shadows under the old growth began. I looked, nothing visible. Old trees, undergrowth, shadow deepening toward the interior. I took a few more shots and moved on. That evening, I mentioned it to Marcus, casually, over dinner. "Watch feeling?" he said. "Yeah, I had that this afternoon. Probably a deer. Big ones in this section, apparently." "Probably," I agreed. We talked about something else. I almost forgot about it. Almost. Day 4. I went deeper into the old growth than I had before, following a dry creek bed that cut through the section and gave me access to some extraordinary root systems. The way old trees grip the soil along a creek bank, the roots exposed and enormous, is something I'd been wanting to photograph for years. I was in there for most of the morning, working slowly, absorbed in the detail. Around noon, I stopped to eat and check my shots on the camera screen. I was sitting on a fallen log at the edge of the creek bed, the forest quiet around me, in the particular way forests go quiet at midday, when everything retreats from the heat. Even in October, I looked up from the camera screen and saw something between the trees. About 100 yards away, directly in my line of sight, between two of the largest old-growth pines I'd seen in that section. Trees that must have been 4 feet across at the base, their lowest branches 30 feet above the ground. Between them, partly in shadow, partly visible, a figure. Very tall, taller than any person should be. I'm 6 feet, and the proportions were wrong, in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. The figure's height relative to the trees around it, simply not consistent with a human being. Dressed, or appearing to be dressed, in dark clothing, or perhaps just dark. The darkness of the figure, something that didn't entirely separate from the shadows around it. No visible features at the distance, no face that I could see. The head was pale, or the area where the head should have been was pale, lighter than the surrounding shadow. And the arms. I noticed the arms because I was a photographer, trained to observe proportions, to notice when something was off. The arms were too long, hanging at the sides, extending too far. The hands, reaching somewhere near the knee level. I stared at it for what was probably 15 seconds, maybe less. Then, I raised my camera and looked through the viewfinder. Nothing there. The 2 pines, the space between them, shadow and undergrowth. Empty. I lowered the camera, looked with my naked eye, empty. I sat on the fallen log for a long time, telling myself the obvious things. A trick of the light. Pareidolia, the brain's tendency to assemble human shapes from ambiguous visual information. Fatigue and eye strain for hours of close detail work. All reasonable, all possible. I packed up my gear and walked back to camp at a pace that wasn't quite running, but faster than it needed to be. I didn't tell Marcus what I'd seen. I lay in the tent for a long time before sleep came, listening to the forest sounds. The wind in the upper canopy, the distant creek, the occasional crack of a branch. Somewhere in the dark, at some point, I fell asleep. At some point after that, I woke up. No specific sound had woken me. I lay still in the sleeping bag, in the dark of the tent, and listened. Wind in the canopy, creek, normal sounds, and then, cutting through the normal sounds, in a way that made my whole body go still. Something else. A sound I can only describe as static. Not loud, actually quite quiet, quieter than the wind, but present in a way that the wind wasn't. Present in the way that a sound made close to you is present. Intimate. Not traveling through air, but arriving somehow differently, as though something was standing very close to the tent wall, and the static was the sound of it being there. I lay completely still. The sleeping bag felt like it was made of lead. I was afraid to move, afraid to make any sound, and I was aware that my fear was disproportionate. But the fear didn't respond to rationality. It was pure and animal and old. The fear of a prey species that knows a predator is close. The static lasted approximately 30 seconds. Then it stopped. I didn't sleep again until the sky started to lighten. Day 5. Marcus wanted to do a 4-mile loop to reach a section of forest that appeared on the map as one of the oldest areas. We set out together. I was glad of the company, even if I didn't say why. The section was everything the map promised. Trees of extraordinary size. The canopy above us so dense the sky was barely visible. Completely still air. The stillness of very old places, of places that have been doing the same thing for centuries, and don't particularly notice the presence of visitors. Marcus was excited. He moved ahead of me, heading for the base of one of the largest trees, where the root system spread across the forest floor like something from a myth. I hung back. I was scanning the middle distance, looking for the shape between the trees, looking for the wrong proportions. And I found them. Further away than before. 200 yards, maybe more, at the very edge of my visual range in the dense forest. Between the trees, barely visible, and the same figure, the same extraordinary height, the same arms. But this time, instead of facing me, it was facing Marcus. Marcus, who was moving away from me, head down, absorbed in his work, not looking up. I opened my mouth to call out to him. Nothing came out. This is the part I've gone over most often in the months since. I stood there with my mouth open and my throat closed, and I didn't call out to my colleague, who was 50 yards ahead of me and moving further away. And what I felt in that moment was not bravery or calculation. It was paralysis, a complete animal paralysis, the kind that overrides every higher function. Then, Marcus looked up and turned around. "Derek, you coming?" The figure was gone. The space between the trees. Empty. "Yeah," I said. My voice came out strange, and Marcus gave me a look. "You all right?" "Fine. Eye strain. Let's get the shots." We worked that section for 3 hours. On the way back to camp, he said, "You've been seeing something." It wasn't a question. "I don't know what I've been seeing," I said. "In the trees." I stopped walking and looked at him. "You too?" "Not seeing," he said carefully. "Feeling. Since yesterday. Something watching. Not from multiple directions. From one. And this morning, when I got to that big tree, my nosebleed started." I stared at him. "Marcus," I said, "we need to leave tomorrow morning." He looked at me. He was a rational man, but he looked at my face, and he nodded. "Tomorrow morning," he agreed. We turned in early. I lay in my tent and listened to the forest and tried to sleep, and mostly failed. Around midnight, I heard Marcus unzip his tent. The sound of footsteps, moving away from camp, toward the tree line. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. I unzipped my tent and went after him. The moon was up, nearly full. I moved in the direction Marcus had gone, following the sound of footsteps that I could just barely hear ahead of me. "Marcus," I called quietly. No response. The footsteps continued. I followed him for what I think was about 10 minutes. I recognized, with a cold lurch, that I was moving into the old growth section, the section we'd worked that afternoon. Marcus. Louder this time. The footsteps ahead of me stopped. Silence. My headlamp cutting a cone of yellow light through the absolute dark of the forest. The shadow beyond my light, absolute. The kind of darkness that used to mean something genuinely dangerous. Then, Marcus said, "Derek." His voice was off. Not frightened. Flat. Like a voice recording. "Derek, come look at this." "Marcus, we need to go back to camp. Come look at this." The same flat tone. The same words. As though he was stuck in a loop. I moved toward his voice. My headlamp found him, standing between two of the enormous old pines, his back to me, facing deeper into the forest. "Marcus," I said, "turn around." He didn't move. I crossed the distance between us and grabbed his shoulder and turned him toward me. His face was blank. Blank in a specific way. The way a face is blank when everything that makes it a face has been temporarily suspended. His eyes were open and tracking, but not present. And behind him, at the edge of my headlamp's reach, there, between the trees, no face, no features on that pale, smooth oval where a face should have been. Arms at its sides, the fingers nearly touching the ground, standing with a stillness that wasn't the stillness of a living thing. The stillness of something that simply is. It was looking at Marcus. I pulled Marcus backward, hard. He stumbled, came into me, and I grabbed him and moved. I didn't look back. I moved, pulling Marcus with me, crashing through undergrowth, not following any trail. With my headlamp bouncing, and the trees enormous around me, and the darkness at my back. Absolute. Marcus started talking about 50 meters in. Still flat, but talking. saying my name, sounding confused. I didn't slow down. We hit the clearing with our camp in it at a run. I got us into the camp perimeter. "Get your shoes," I said to Marcus. "Get your shoes and get your jacket. And we're leaving right now. We'll come back for the gear." He looked at my face. He got his shoes. We walked out, 4 miles in the dark. Marcus didn't remember leaving the tent. The gap in his memory was approximately 90 minutes. His nosebleed started again on the trail out. He bled through 2 bandanas before we reached the car. We drove straight to the nearest town, checked into a motel, and sat in the room with all the lights on until sunrise. Then we drove home. Then we gave statements to the police, which described a colleague who had sleepwalked into the forest and been retrieved safely, which was true as far as it went. We went back for our gear 3 days later, in daylight, with 2 other people. Everything was where we'd left it. My camera, Marcus's macro equipment, the tents. My camera had photographs I hadn't taken. 43 images at the end of the card, after the last frame I remembered shooting. Most of them were dark, underexposed, and unusable, but 3 of them were different. 3 images, taken in sequence, that showed the clearing at the edge of the old growth section. In the first, the clearing was empty. In the second, something was visible at the edge of the tree line. In the third, it was closer. Closer in the way that things in photographs shouldn't be able to get closer. Between frames. No face in any of them, just the pale oval. The long arms. I gave the images to the police. I was told they were inconclusive. The case remained open as a missing persons investigation after Marcus Webb failed to return home. 3 weeks after we came back from the Allegheny, Marcus went back. I don't know why. He went alone. He left his car at the trailhead. The car was found 4 days later. Marcus was not found. Search and rescue covered the area twice. Cadaver dogs found nothing. Marcus was not found. I'm recording this in my apartment in the city, 8 months after the Allegheny. I'm recording it because Marcus Webb went into that forest and did not come out. And the official record says the cause is undetermined. I want there to be another record. Something drew Marcus back. I've thought about it from every angle. So, whatever drew him back wasn't irrational impulse. It was something else. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it is. I know that it's real because I have 3 photographs on a memory card locked in the drawer of my desk that show it. I know it's real because sometimes at night I dream about the Allegheny. In the dream, it is always looking at me. And in the dream, I understand that it was looking at me the whole time. That the attention on Marcus was the bait. That what it wanted was the one who would follow. I wake from that dream in the dark, and I lie still and wait for my heart to slow down, and I don't go back to sleep for a long time. If you are listening to this and you're planning a trip to a forest, I want you to know one thing. If you are in the trees and the forest goes quiet, stop walking. Don't move toward the quiet. Don't move toward whatever your companion is looking at. If they've stopped and gone still, And if someone you're with walks toward the tree line at midnight and doesn't respond when you call their name, let them go. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. But Marcus went back, and I have 3 photographs in a locked drawer. And Marcus's last text to me was a trail map of the Allegheny, with a pin dropped in the old growth section. He sent no message with the map, just the pin. I still have the photograph. The third one, where it filled the frame. I've looked at it more times than I should have. And every time I look at it, I think the same thing. I think it knew the camera was there.